That's the funny part is well, first of all, I'd say that I would have never done this on any of my accounts that I cared about, right? It was only because it was a kiosk. And I think it's because it's MGM. This probably jinxed us, but we had the conversation about which casino he was going to go to redeem the tickets, because we were clearly going to get banned from that casino. So like, let's make it like one of the crappy ones, right? That's an MGM property, and just bet.
Come on, let's go!
Welcome to Circles Off, episode number 152 right here, part of the Hammer Betting Network and presented by Pinnacle Sportsbook. We have a great interview coming up for you today. You may have previously seen this man on the program more than a couple of years ago. But before we get into it, I do want to remind you that we are proudly sponsored by Pinnacle Sportsbook, in business and trusted for the past 25 years. If you're looking for a sportsbook to bet at, I highly recommend betting at Pinnacle Sportsbook. Tons of different betting options available to you. Great customer service, great limits. If you're a winning bettor, you're not going to get banned. You're not going to get limited. So bet smart, bet Pinnacle. You must be 19 plus, not available in the U.S. And as always, preach it every week, please play responsibly. Our guest this week joins us for the second time here on Circles Off after appearing in episode 48. Seems like ages ago. Episode 48. He's now a pro bettor, still originating college basketball, but potentially a whole lot more. We'll get into that today. You can follow him on Twitter at Telemachus Model. We'll link that down in the description below. Taylor joins us here on Circles Off. Taylor, how's it going?
Good. It's great to be back.
Taylor, second time round the order, second time batting. You had a lot change from last time, right? We've been following you on Twitter. Obviously part of a new operation now. So let the people know, what are you doing now? What's different from last time?
Yeah, so I guess last episode was in March of 2022. Over that summer, I started doing some baseball modeling, attacking SGP stuff. I found a few angles that I attacked and actually wrote an article for Unabated on a flaw that Caesars had for ninth inning money lines. And as part of that, they asked me, how do you want to be compensated? And I was like, I don't want, $200 for writing an article. I don't have a future in, copy editing. But I said, I want 15 minutes of Rufus's time, because I'd never met him. I wanted help on like a hard statistics problem that I didn't know the answer to. And they agreed. And so I pulled Rufus, I got on a 15-minute call with them. I laid out the type of SGP I was attacking. I was like, here's my data. Like, give me your 5-minute approach to how you go about this. And then he spent the next hour being like, well, here's how I go about it. Here's the things I would do. We had a great conversation on it. And at the end, he's like, okay, here's the things I want you to do, and then send me this updated data. And I was like, whoa. We talked about 15 minutes. I don't want to take up a bunch of your time. And not knowing him, I didn't realize that if he finds something he's interested in, he's going to, be attached to it. And so, we kind of iterated on that for a month or so. And at the end of it, he's like, this has been really fun. We work really well together. You should join my group. And I kind of had no idea what that meant. One, I didn't know what his group consisted of. Two, I didn't really know anyone in the industry personally at that point. And, all I knew were, the assholes on Twitter and the guys who run podcasts, right? So Rufus was one of the pillars of people who bet successfully. And he's asked me to be part of his group. So I'm like, do you want me to move for you or beard for you? And he's like, no, join our group. And so that was, we explored that a little bit more and what that would mean. Made sure I was going to be, a true part of the team with risk and profit, not some hourly employee. But after that, it was a no-brainer. So I joined Rufus's group, which turns out is me, Rufus, and his brother Tom, and then one other guy who's kind of a silent member. And I've been working with them since. We bet college basketball in 2022, 2023, bet golf after that, and then just finished another college basketball season.
That's actually a pretty amazing story.
What a story.
And instead of just saying, yeah, compensate me a couple $100 for an article, you're like, yeah, I just want this guy's time, which could end up being more valuable. Risk reward. That's actually really cool. For those who are new here and they don't know, the Rufus that Taylor's referring to is Rufus Peabody, one of the more successful bettors in the industry.
Allegedly.
I can't say for sure. I can never say for sure. I can never say for sure. Maybe Taylor can himself. But in that interview that we had with you on Circles Off, episode 48, March 2022, you talked at that time about aspiring to be a pro bettor. I actually think the title of that episode is turning 2K into 250K or something like that, which was something you said on the episode. But you did say that you were aspiring to be a pro bettor. Now that you've reached that goal, you're working with a larger betting group. Are there any major differences in what an actual pro betting group is versus what your expectation originally was?
Sure. Yeah, there's a few. And I can really only speak to what our group does. And I think all groups are going to be a little bit different. But kind of the first thing that occurred to me was there's still a number of judgment calls where we don't know the correct answer. Like in my mind, as an aspiring bettor, I was like, whenever I'd run into a problem, I'm like, oh, well, like the pros know the answer to this, right? And looking back, it's kind of a ridiculous assumption. But the number of times we're like, hey, we've got a modeling problem, or like there's a data problem, or like, are we going to attack this market? Or just like, how are we going to attack this market? Where the result is essentially like, I don't know, like we're gonna guess and like go after it. It's much higher than I thought it would be previously. I think retrospectively, like it makes a ton of sense. Like no one has all the answers. The second thing, and you guys hammer this a lot, is the degree to which your network still matters. And I won't harp on this because you guys talk about it a lot. But before I became a pro, I assumed I need a network so I can get my foot in the door, so that like I can do this professionally. But I'll take this route. So I've seen people give Rufus flack. They say like, hey, if he's such a good bettor, like why is he doing podcasts? Why is he, spending his time on Undebated, things like that? I don't think they understand how valuable the network he's built by being like a public figure and like knowing everyone. The number of opportunities that get brought to us, the number of times where we're like, we've just lost a major out and Rufus has to tap into his network and be like, all right. Like it's just the amount of value in that network is so much higher than, the time and money he's lost doing podcasts, or the edges he's inadvertently or given away on purpose, like through Unabated. Like it doesn't compare. Like your network still matters so much. And I'd say the last thing is the degree to which we can still be irrational about short-term results. Yep. We assume that my assumption was once you become professional, like you're not going to get swayed. You're not going to get rattled as easy. I couldn't be more wrong. Just like the stuff we do. I mean, when I ended the podcast with you guys, I mentioned that like my bankroll had got up to 250K. I think it was the third week on the team, we just had an atrocious like week. We lost like 300K that week, and it was all in college football. And it was like, man, this is a big deal. But I'm like, it'll get better, right? It always gets better. You'll become more immune to this, and I have become more immune to it. But we just finished our college basketball season. We had 15 winning weeks and 3 losing weeks. So you'd look back at that and you'd say like, man, must have been relatively stress-free, like smooth sailing. And that couldn't be more wrong. Like super stressful the whole time. It doesn't really matter how much you're winning. You're going to focus on losses, like short-term variance. I think we moved, it doesn't affect just us. It affects me. It affects other people. But we moved through probably 15 or 20 people, and throughout that span, and 3 like professional movers dropped us because we weren't winning enough, right? And it's like, I don't blame them for that at all. Like that's their choice, and like all depends on how they want to spend their time. But like to still have like short-term results, like impact your decision making, I will always be fighting it, but I don't think it'll ever go away.
Interesting. A couple notes there. So networking, great. It's always great when guests come on and they talk about stuff that we've been talking about, because it's just like a assertion that what we are saying is like not stuff that we're making up altogether. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because I do think it's invaluable. On the betting side, and you have 15 winning weeks in college basketball and 3 losing weeks. Anyone who might hear that be like, wow, what's the problem? What is it in those losing weeks that causes you to lose confidence? I can think of some different scenarios. I've been parts of groups before where, we might control the market for that sport. So we might lose, generate a lot of closing line value, but it's all artificial. We don't know if it's real or not because, we're betting back whenever the market's moving against us or whatever. So for me, that's what's always caused me to lose confidence in the past. It's like, shit, we just lost 2 weeks in a row. The closing line value is meaningless. We can't judge this because somebody, we're controlling it. On your end, what is it about those individual weeks? What's happening there that might cause you to be like, I don't know if I actually have something here?
Right. It's, I kind of use that as a way to say like it was overall a good season, but we started off super hot, like ridiculously hot for the first 2 months, and then had a few massive like losing weeks, and you wonder if you had caught onto something that the market hadn't picked up on. Like there was some rule changes in college basketball this year, and I think we predicted those well. And so then the question is, has the market caught up to us? And like, was that the only thing that was causing us to win? Right. So then we're evaluating all of our metrics. And then, the other thing is that our models are kind of the nature of the way we work are not stagnant. So like we're changing the model multiple times a week. We're making improvements. We're, tweaking the way we either regress to market or, factor in other things. And we've had a number of times where we've just done something incorrectly. We've got a bug in the system, and it's like, no matter how bad your bug is, you shouldn't lose like 70% of your games like on a regular basis, right? Actually, that'd be one hell of a bug. I'd love that bug. But like there's just enough uncertainty where you're like something could be wrong. Like, and like you said, like we're at the point where CLV doesn't matter to us, and so there's it's hard to have an external check to be like, don't worry, we're on the right path. You don't have that safety blanket anymore.
Totally get it. Now, originally, when we had you on the first time around, it was part of like a series of episodes that we wanted to do where we highlighted people that were posting on betstamp and doing so by not like scamming the system. And we're just out there that we recognize as this person is a winning bettor. And at that time, we had you on, you're tracking on betstamp, you were finding a lot of success, but to your own admission, you were betting a lot of early market college basketball totals. And funny enough, once people started to catch wind of you at that time, those totals were flying as soon as you would post them as well. So you were getting that additional boost from other people. But how has that success, that level of success changed for you having to operate at a larger scale? I assume you're not, most of your action liquidity is not overnight anymore.
Right. Yeah, we don't bet overnights anymore. I think we could probably do some stuff there if we wanted to, but it's just not worth it. It's essentially you're trading ROI for volume, right? Like that's the name of the game. The big question is, when do you bet? And it's not a linear dial. It's not one dial's up and one dial's down. It's like you got to figure out the right point where you can maximize things. I've heard you guys talk a lot about how do you judge someone's success, and I think ROI comes up a lot, but that is if you're trying to control for bankroll. Like if you're not, your goal is just make as much money as you possibly can, right? So, before I joined this group, it was like I need to get $500 down on the game, and like this year for us, it was like, how do we get 30K down on a college basketball total, right? And there's only one way to do that. It's essentially wait for the market to be very mature, right? Like we might know that we have some outs that are quiet that we can get down at, but we just wait till we know we can get our fill and then attack that. And all of our back testing switches from like betting at market open to like betting at essentially, once the market has matured, once we see that lines have stabilized, and knowing that if things hold in the past and, the market doesn't get significantly more efficient in the last few months, that like we should continue to win here. And so we're, every morning when we wake up and identify our bets, we're constantly discussing like, what do we hit when, who are we going to move through when, how are we going to attack certain games that we think might move fast. And we're trading a 9.5% ROI from like college basketball overnights to I think this year on totals for apple to apples, we hit like 4.5% ROI, but on volume that was, 120 times larger, right? Like it's like you just gotta and there's nothing more painful than watching value disappear from a board. And so you struggle with that. But like once you can get past that, you realize that you just need to wait and then deal with the fact that you're going to be losing a lot more.
Yeah,
I've been saying this. I've been saying that whenever as someone's evaluating like who's a better wagerer, who's a better gambler, who's a better bettor, like they always say like, oh, but how many units did you win? What's your ROI? Yeah. What's your unit size? At the end of the day, you want to know the best of the best is whoever wins the most amount of money. End of story. So I'm very happy you said that. And you mentioned something that's crazy is like betting overnight versus betting at post versus betting in the morning. It's exactly what you said. It's trading ROI for volume. And there's becomes some sort of break-even point where it's like, okay, if you can't win, then let's say you have low edge, you can only beat overnight. Eventually, you'll have to wait closer and closer to post if you want to get more money. But there will be a break-even where it's like, okay, I can't really beat post. So it's best for me to bet at 11 a.m. or 8 a.m., anything like that.
Yeah, so we did a Q&A long time ago now where one of the questions was along the lines of who would you rather tail, 5 sharp bettors in some sport who are betting a little bit smaller or one large betting group from that sport. And me and you, Johnny, both answered we'd rather be on the large betting group because we know that they can win at higher limits and whatever. We got roasted for that in the comments.
It was incorrect if people disagree.
Listen, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but
right.
I mean, go ahead, Taylor. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I mean, now that you've worked in this type of setting, has that altered your viewpoint or like how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have the same answer unless, okay, the only way I'd say differently is if I could see those 5 people's models and know that they had been built in very different ways, I'd then be interested to see like, what does the ensemble of that output look like? Like I could make an argument that actually might be a better approach, but I wouldn't bet when they bet. Like I'd bet way after they bet, right? Just it depends on the size of your bankroll, right?
I believe the question was 5 sharp bettors betting on the same side of one game. Each of them have a $250K bankroll or one syndicate with a $50 million bankroll on the other side, which is a very easy question when you phrase it like that.
Yeah, it's the syndicate.
Yep. Yeah. Without a doubt. And people don't realize like the 5 individual bettors, the biggest syndicates will have more than 5 individual bettors within it as well. Like you think of Star Lizard and like Tony Bloom and having like 40 quants, each with their own models and whatever. I don't know the debate there, but we did get flamed for that one. I wanted to bring that one.
No good. We're going to ask you a few other things, Taylor, maybe a little bit off script here is, so college basketball seemed like based on how many winning weeks you had must have been a good season. But overall, how was it? How was the season? How was like the experience? Like, how was it?
I mean, it's brutal. Like it's just absolutely brutal. Like we started off really hot, which was nice. It was so I've had 2 college basketball seasons now in the group. And they were mere opposites of each other. The first season we did terribly early on. Like in January, there was a point where we were negative on the season. And like, I'm questioning, like, should I be doing this? Like, do I need to, is the dream over? Like, let's be done. And we had just a fantastic run after that. And I think Rufus had tweeted some stuff about that, but like, I think we ended up at like 4.1% ROI on totals that season. This season was exactly the opposite. So we started off super hot. Like in January, we were at like 13% ROI and then ended at like 4.5% ROI, right? So it's like roughly the same season overall. I felt way better at the end of last season than I do right now about our college basketball stuff. Even though we had a higher ROI at like higher volume, it's just I found it to be so hard to remove myself from like the constant questioning of, are we doing things right? Like, are we hitting a bug? Is there a reason we're losing? Like the list of improvements that I want to make to our model is longer now than it was when I joined the team. And I'm just constantly looking at that list being like, oh, that, we're missing that. That's why we're losing this week, And so there's like the mental aspect of just dealing with winning and losing. And then there is the nature of the grind. Like college basketball season is relentless, starting at November 6th to whenever the tournament starts. Like Christmas Day is the only day without a college basketball game. So that's every morning. Here's my projections for the day. It takes 10 minutes to spit out my projections, but then you've got, injuries. You've got questions like, is Tulane playing today and what are they doing? You know, like, are we going to stay away? Or are we going to bet that? Like, let's have that debate. And then there's like a college basketball Saturday, like where things go all day. There's 3 of us on the team, right? So Tom, Rufus's brother's in charge of trading, but like a college basketball Saturday is a 2.5 person job. Like if you're both working the entire time. And so just like the lack of sleep, the time away from family, you know, has me very thankful that college basketball is not a year-round sport, even though it's incredibly profitable.
I have to ask you and follow up on that just because of the tone in which you answered the question. So this is very personal, but do you actually enjoy betting on sports? Or let me like rephrase this in another way. If you could make the same income that you did and put in the same amount of time in another field where you were, let's just say, happier, even marginally, would you do that?
No, that question doesn't make any sense.
Well, there's
you're basically if you could make the same amount of money and be happier, would you do that? You can't say be happier. Well, if you can make the same amount of money doing something else, but
sure, okay, fine. We'll go there because some people. The only reason I phrase it that way is some people love the challenge of solving problems, and with sports, that's part of it. Where they would sacrifice happiness to just to have that challenge because of the happiness that it could lead to.
So then they're not sacrificing happiness.
It's true. But anyways, you kind of get the gist of where I'm going here.
Do you like betting? Yes or no?
Yes. It's okay. I hate betting. Like
modeling.
Man, I like modeling. I like market dynamics, right? Like, so like I enjoy board games. Like if you want to have a podcast about a board game, like I said, board games, so we could have that. And this is essentially like a board game in real life. So I'm really looking forward to the next 6 months. Like for me, it's all going to be about what are the flaws in my model and how do I improve them? And like I come to work every day and I'm just pumped to work on that. Or if we're talking about like, even during the season, like let's talk about, you know, like what is a fake? Like where do we need to be betting today to get the most down? Like that's a puzzle. Like let's solve that puzzle. But like I want it in smaller doses. I want it in like times when I don't have to be like putting my kids down, right? Like so my only complaint, like I love the work. It's super intellectually stimulating. The hard part is that it's not 9 to 5, right?
Do you have scheduled hours? For the group?
This is a constant debate within the group, right? Because like there's a desire to have scheduled hours. But when it comes down to it, since there's only 3 of us, like schedules just get dominated by random things, right? So we've tried to lay out schedules for like, hey, Tom's covering, you know, after hours. We're all there during business hours, but Tom's covering after hours like Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, right? But like, what happens when Rufus has to do a podcast like on his night, or like my kids are sick, or like, you know, Tom is, you know, in a golf event or something, right?
What happens during the Peabody Cup when Tom and Rufus are on the course together?
Right. Yeah. You know, it's all me, right? No. We haven't been able to come up with something where we can stick to a schedule, but we've gotten better at communication around like who's going to be around. Like the number of times where, you know, either we're like fielding a cross or like, you know, asking or need to like react to like something happening, a late breaking move against us. Like the number of times early on where we're like, there's just no one around. Like to now where we have someone there usually to answer the question.
So I take it though that even though Tom is like head of trading and you got introduced to the group because of the origination, I take it that you have more responsibilities within the group other than just originating the numbers.
Oh, absolutely. So, you know, high level roles, like I'm on basketball, Rufus is on golf and football, and Tom's on trading. But like, I don't have enough knowledge to do basketball better than we could do it together, right? So Rufus helps with that. Like I make a bunch of contributions to the golf model whenever he needs them, and I'm generally our tech person when we need tech solutions. And then, like to say Tom is head of trading, but then give him no one to work under him is just like criminal, right? So,
can you be head of trading if you're the only trader?
You can, because it's a 4-person job, right?
Yeah.
So like he's just doing the role of 4 people. And so we're always constantly filling in where we need to. And, there were a few times, like on a college basketball Saturday, where all three of us work, 6 a.m. till essentially the game stop. And like, we look at it and we're like, we couldn't have done that without all three of us. Right. So we all just kind of fill in as needed.
From the pure origination standpoint, how often does Rufus venture into basketball and you venture out into golf or football? Does that happen at all?
It does, only when we're losing. No, I'm just.
You guys bet any football?
Yeah, we still bet college football. We do the Super Bowl really heavily. And then some light NFL, like when we have some intuition on certain things, but not regularly.
Very, very cool. I wanted to ask you something here. So Rufus is this is all alleged stuff here, but Rufus is a good bettor. I know you guys allegedly are a very profitable group. When we're looking at college basketball, college football, stuff like that, what kind of ROI are you guys expecting? You don't have to say exactly what you earned last year or whatever, but what rough ROI are you expecting? Because I think a lot of people listening to this podcast aren't necessarily familiar with specifically actually how low the ROI is for these big pro groups and these guys who are actually making much more than a good living. So what do you expect to earn ROI wise? Maybe it's different per sport.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying this, that like in last week's episode, Rob talked about not having a bed that controls the temperature of your body while you sleep. Mm-hmm. Like we've made enough money that I now have one of those.
Let's go.
I would strongly endorse getting one of those.
Okay, there we go. I was looking for an endorsement from someone.
Here's a bonus plus EV move of the week.
They're also not that expensive. Yeah. We shoot for 5% ROI, right? Like we want to hit like roughly 55%. That's kind of our baseline. But I think Rufus talked about this in a podcast, maybe in their like end of the year That's the Process podcast, where we've had a big focus on volume. Like we've had some doors open where we could get a lot more down, and have made a conscious decision to lower that, right? Like we'd gladly take 3.5% at a much larger volume. Like I don't think we'd be comfortable going much lower than that, because your model's edge is what your model says, plus or minus like 5%, right? So I never want to risk going negative, but like I would actually say if we're hitting 5% ROI, we're not betting enough, or we're betting in too small of a market, right? So we have these debates about, do we go after, like a new golf market is over under round score that you're seeing in a lot of places, right? It's like, do we invest a bunch of time in that to get down, $500 to $2,000 on a golfer each week? Probably not. So we'll actively avoid going for markets that we think we could return a whole bunch of money on, just because the volume's not there.
Makes sense.
I agree with that completely. At the end of the day, like we've talked about this before, and you always say, a lot of people ask, especially in the Q&A, say, oh, I'm just starting, like I want to build my own model, like what sport should I go after? Like what's the easiest to beat? We always say, start with the smaller markets, obviously, but you got to pick which smaller market you want to start with, because some of them you're just literally never going to graduate past a couple $100. So like, that's why we talk about player props a lot. Like player props for the major sports are easier to beat and you can actually get down, but maybe golf round score, not as much, but I feel you there. Like it's tough to put a lot of time into even just the work of actually trading it and betting it and stuff like that. When at the end of the day, this game, it's very simple in terms of how to make money, which is you need your volume times your ROI, and that's going to be your expected amount of money that you make at the end of the week. So you can have a 10% edge, but if you're only getting down $100, it's only $10 a click. And if you can only do that 10 times a week, then sure, you don't say no to $100 if you're just starting, but it's not really worth it at the end of the day to put all that time into it.
Yep. The one thing I'll add there is it is too easy to become a robot some of the times. So like, just to give that specific example, the one time where we'll say like, hey, we should actually go after that is if like Rufus or Tom or I is like, hey, that's a super interesting problem. Like I'm motivated by that problem. I want to work on it. And it's something that I see with Rufus and myself and Tom is that sometimes like the vacation that we need is just like a new interesting problem, right? Like there's not a lot of vacations taken because we generally enjoy the work, and we can recharge ourselves by working on something small like that. And then, if we bet it religiously or not, doesn't really matter.
Yep, totally get it. You mentioned that you guys do Super Bowl props. I did want to ask you, because there was a video that circulated around Super Bowl time. I can't remember if Rufus tweeted it. I don't remember the details. It was a very short clip of a bunch of guys watching the Super Bowl in a room. It's probably no more than 5 seconds, where a play happened and everyone was super upset. And the accompanying caption on the tweet was something along the lines of, this play was a $500,000 swing. Or were you in the room when that happened?
I was not in the room when it happened, but I was doing the same thing in my living room at the time. So it's actually a good story. We originate all of our Super Bowl stuff. Rufus and Tom go out to Vegas. I generally stay back and bet the legals in my state. And not to promote competition, but Gamblers did a good podcast, I think 2 years ago, where they followed Rufus and Tom around, and it's a good story. But so Tom is one of our runners. So he's carrying around a bunch of money, and he'll be like, "Hey, I'm at Circa, and this is what I'm seeing on the board. Like, give me a list of plays," and he'll send us some prices usually. And the day of, he's at, I want to say it was an MGM casino, and sends us a list of prices, and we're like, "Well, that one's this price. You're clearly off there." And it was Noah Gray under 13.5 receiving yards. And I don't know if this is well known or not, but the casino in question had made a mistake that day. I think they went to type the yes side at -130, and they put in -1300, and the no side automatically went to like +850.
And this is in Nevada, where they would have to honor that ticket
for every ticket you had. And to add insult to injury, they were taking really low limits. It was like $200 a pop, and they would only let you bet 10 times before they kicked you off the kiosk. But they never fixed it. And so Tom was a hero and bet that straight for like 5 hours. So like, he just kept texting us being like, "How much money do we want on this? Like, when do you guys want me to stop?" And the answer was like, all of it, and don't stop, and so I think he got down $50K on it is what it ended up being. And so it was a $50K loss instead of a $450K win. And I think he actually injured his finger at one point. Like, he came back complaining about his hand hurting.
You listen,
it took him five hours to get down $50K. He's got to take a lesson from Kanish, bro. That he should have been in 25 minutes.
No way, man. They just kick you off, and there's lines at Super Bowl. So he's waiting in lines to get on kiosks and stuff.
Man,
and it was the last drive too. It was
I remember.
Last drive before overtime, right? It was.
Yeah. Oh, that's brutal.
He wasn't even on the field until that drive. I felt like he had one other catch.
All that work for essentially nothing, but
that is brutal, man.
It's tough. I mean, some people might be interested in. So, just a few days ago, there was a situation where the guy who goes by Point Sucks on Twitter, he's been kind of like angle shooting at Circa, right? Very clearly pass posting. People might be like, how's he doing it? Well, Circa is very manual. They're not using third-party feeds for some second half lines.
No, don't tell them. Now they're going to get jammed by everybody. Jeff, we're sorry, buddy. This is raw,
no,
man.
But
I didn't want to say.
You shouldn't do this if the account matters to you, is what I'm getting at, right? And like, he's really upset and he's cheesed that he won like 20K there, and they're like, "We don't want your action anymore," because he's clearly pass posting, which, fine, everyone has the right to do that and take their shot. But if the account matters to you and you're going to complain about it afterwards, then don't do it. Don't do the pass posting if the account matters. In this situation, I'm sure that you guys probably cannot bet at this spot again. Like, they must have figured out what was happening there, right?
Well, that's the funny part is first of all, I'd say that I would have never done this on any of my accounts that I cared about, right? It was only because it was a kiosk. And I think it's because it's MGM. We this probably jinxed us, but we had the conversation about which casino he was going to go to redeem the tickets, because we were clearly going to get banned from that casino. So like, let's make it like one of the crappy ones, right? That's an MGM property, and just bet MGM at other places. But yeah, like, we're only doing this because it's totally worth getting burned from one casino, and it's at a kiosk, and they have to honor the ticket.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate what we said there, last point is, if you did this on your regular account, they're avoiding the bet. So like, don't think if you guys find a crazy error that you're just going to make whatever, $1 million. Like they're avoiding that bet 99 out of 100 on any regulated book on app. It's just in Nevada, they're not legally able to avoid the bets.
Yeah. PPH, they're going to probably even free roll that bet.
Yeah, PPH, they're free rolling it, and some of the legals will free roll it. Some of the regulators,
they'll just wait till it's final before they decide.
They'll wait, and then afterwards you'll see this was void, or even worse, they'll wait. It'll lose, and then it'll lose, and it'll win, and then they'll say, correct price, minus 145. So we're only paying you out on minus 145, not plus 900 or whatever it was.
That's a classic move nowadays as well. Sorry, I went a little bit off track there, but I remember that Super Bowl story. I had to ask you about it. You also recently tweeted that as part of your college basketball bet tracking, you classify any bet that flipped from a win to a loss or vice versa as an OT flip, and you track your record on OT flips. Lots of people do this for other sports. I do this similarly to like shootouts in hockey, which is kind of a coin flip. Out of curiosity, is that purely so that you can measure your luck, or have you ever given thought to potentially modeling the overtime itself as if it's like a different game, whether that's going to be incorporated in your pregame model or maybe like trying to find an edge in live? Just curious on that.
Yeah, so the first part of the question I'll take first. This came about for a good reason, in that, well, I'd say a good rational reason, but I found it had value for irrational reasons. We had, like I mentioned, we had a really strong start to the first 2 months of college basketball season. And we were kind of asking ourselves, like, should we be betting more, right? We're already betting like a decent amount, but should we be trying to get down as much as we possibly can? And so Rufus came up with the OT flip stuff. He also came up with this notion of expected ROI based on, the final score and how much did you win by 10 points or did you win by 1 point? And like, what's the expected ROI of that? And
how much is Rufus's expected ROI? For sure, 100% going to be better than his actual ROI. And this is not even a chirp to Rufus, but anyone listening, I hope you guys appreciate that 100%. Go ahead, Taylor.
The problem is it always shows lower on mine. It always shows like 2% lower for like 4,000 bets. And so I'm always like, Rufus, I don't know what you're doing here, but it's just, you're just trying to hurt me. So we basically found that, hey, we're doing well on expected ROI. We should up our bet size. And of course that preceded our massive losing streak or massive losing week. And the value I found on it was more in the irrational space. So we have a daily bet tracking sheet, right? It's just all of our positions for the day. And so at the end of the day, we can know roughly how much we made or lost. And there's nothing worse than betting like under 140 on a game and then having it regulation end at like 122 in a massively slow game. And then it goes to overtime and it ends at 142. So I got to go in there and like mark that as a loss. And like, that's still gives me like so much angst doing that. Cause it's like, I want to convince the spreadsheet that I was right, but you can't see the final score. And so I've actually found there to be like a nice dopamine hit when I can like tick the box, which is like, oh no, this was an OT flip, right? Like just so the spreadsheet knows that it shouldn't laugh at me, that it was just like bad luck. And like those little things actually help cope in like the day to day, like when you're just like deep in it and you're tired and I actually took some pride like in how big that number had gotten. It's why I tweeted it out. It's like, there's nothing better than winning with bad luck, right? Like that feeling is good. It actually got to the point at the end of the season where I'm like, hey, we're winning some overtime games and our number is not as, our massively negative OT flip number is not as negative as it was. And like, I'll take the money, but it was a little painful to see that go down.
Yeah. This is not a slight to you guys, but a lot of people do this. And Rob has done this in the past too, with his hockey OT numbers.
Dink, rest in peace, Dink.
Dink was
the most famous king of complaining about the
overtime record.
Yeah.
When was the, like, I was going to say this. Go ahead, Taylor.
I was going to say, I can answer the other half of the question too, unless you want to go on the first part.
I got a quick rant. Has anybody there listening ever seen any person in history put out a tweet or a thing saying, my OT luck has been phenomenal this year. I am up 37 units in overtime. You'll never hear anyone tweet that, only the negative.
I'll go one further. Taylor said that it's a great feeling when you're winning and having bad luck. Imagine you're losing with a ton of good luck. Like, imagine somebody actually tweeting, like, I'm down 24 units on college basketball this year, but I'm 13-1 in overtime.
And I won 6 overs in double OT. They can't. Everyone's it's funny, but no one's ever tweeted because no one's ever done the work. No one's ever done the work to think about it unless you feel you've had a lot of tough losses and you go back and calculate.
I mean, obviously Taylor puts a lot of stock into bet tracking, and like for me, that's just something that you need to know as a bettor is, am I getting lucky or unlucky? And obviously you can use the closing line. If you're not influencing the closing line, you can generally use that as a very good indicator. But there's times where you're influencing it and you need other metrics that are going to help you keep your sanity in some way or another. So anyways, I'm just a big proponent of tracking bets. I think it's extremely important, and knowing whether or not a hot streak is actually a hot streak or if it's just, you being lucky or whatever. But continue on, Taylor, about modeling OT, if you ever put any thought into that.
Right. So let's say there's like a hypothetical situation where you were going to select a random 5 minutes of a basketball game, and you wanted me or my model to predict what's going to happen in that 5 minutes. And you would tell me some things about game state, and you'd ask me, like, do you want to know if it's OT or not? I'd want to know because I think it would help me predict what's going to happen. But I don't think it's necessarily explanatory, right? So I think OT, knowing whether it's OT or not, is a good proxy for things that are observable, some things that are observable and some things that are not observable, right? So we could say the state of OT is there's probably more impact from foul trouble because people have fouled out, and like there's going to be more people tired. But those are observable things, right? If I'm tracking the play-by-play well enough, like I'd rather have those two things directly in my model. But there's some things I can't observe, right? So like coach tendencies or the notion of pressure, like on shooters, or player behavior, or even ref behavior, right? Like what do they do during OT during home games, right? And so that's where, if I was trying to explain why did this happen, I would not include OT in like my model. If I'm just trying to predict what's going to happen, I'd say, yeah, let's use OT as an input to my model to help predict what's going to happen. Because I do think as long as I can convince myself I'm not just overfitting, that there is something predictive in there. But I don't fundamentally think OT is a different game than the rest of basketball. I reserve the right to be wrong there.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just genuinely curious. We did an episode, I don't know, it's not even too long ago, where me and Johnny talked about NHL overtimes, because we look at the prices of the overtime to start. And I think as hockey fans, we're just like, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Why is one team not favored by that much more than the other? But I've done so much work on this and to no avail in terms of beating that market. So at some point, you just got to say, yeah.
Basketball OTs, especially college basketball, one thing I find a lot of people tweeting about or talking about, they don't factor in is like they complain about their luck when they're like, oh, I lost so many totals in overtime. But if you're betting all unders, like you're going to lose some in overtime. If you're betting like 70% unders on totals, you're going to lose some in OT. That's just how it goes. And same thing with underdogs. Like when you reset a 5-minute quarter now, 5-minute period, whatever you want to call it. Like the favorite now, sure, they don't go back to their pregame line. But let's say you had an 8.5-point favorite. They go into OT, like start of OT. They're 4-point faves, 3.5-point faves, 4.5-point faves, depending on, situation. Like if you lose a dog in OT, that's tough because, you obviously had it there, but it's well within the realm of possibility. You had 5 minutes of the game. Like you're likely going to lose more dogs in OT than more favorites in OT. And people don't factor that in.
It's a lot of things people don't factor in, Johnny. That's the nature of the sports betting industry. Recently, I saw Rufus post something on Twitter in regards to people who are always claiming to have his access to his golf. Now, a lot of people who claim to have access to his golf, or maybe potentially your college basketball, probably betting that stuff at worse numbers. However, it's an information game. You said you love market dynamics. How much thought, if any, do you guys put into disguising your action? Like, does it bother you at all when there's people who come out of the woodwork and they're like, yeah, I know Rufus's golf stuff. Do you guys let that get to you? Do you guys think about that internally in terms of altering processes? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so it doesn't bother me at all. I actually really enjoy it when I see that. So I think there's like three things here in my mind. So the first is when you put a bet out in the market, you need to know what impact it's going to have, right? So we want to get 25K down on a game. We can look at all of our outs and we can say, all right, at 10 a.m., we can bet these places and get 5K, and then we're going to wait till, 2 p.m. and hit these other shops and get the rest of it. But we can only do that if we know that the market isn't going to react to our bet there, if we know that those outs are truly quiet. And that's like a moving problem. Like usually accounts that are quiet won't stay quiet forever, right? Like people are going to see that those are winning and then do something with them. So I wouldn't call that disguising, but I think it is part of understanding like what is going to happen when you put your bet out there. So the second thing is about tendencies. So let's say the college basketball season started and we bet overs in the first 4 Texas games, right? And like bet them hard. If I'm betting at a rec book, I don't really care. If I'm betting at a place like Circa, I'll just pick on Circa. Or like if we've got a partner who's, maybe an adversarial relationship we have with a partner where they like use our information but give us a good bet. I don't want them knowing that we're likely going to be on Texas again, right? So let's say the 5th game rolls around and Circa opens up higher than everyone else, where the under is actually like neutral EV or a little bit negative EV. Like I might go bet the under there just to be like, hey, you tried to use our information to your advantage, but like we're going to make it seem like it went the wrong way. Or maybe we'll have a different proxy service hit Circa for us. But we don't want the people in the industry that we respect getting too much insight into our model for things that are continuous throughout the season. But the last thing, kind of the thing you mentioned, is this notion of when someone gets our stuff, right? We've had this happen a few times. We're kind of always running experiments every day. The nice thing about college basketball season being relentless is that every day we can run experiments in the market, and we can say, okay, let's just send to these partners today, like see what happens. Send to them first, send to them last. And so there's nothing better than when I can send a bet to either a partner or, which we had this season, a legal shop, and then see, these 3 sites over here move. And like I sent a $500 bet in and I see $5,000 worth of market movement, right? Because I'm now like a puppet master at that point, right? Like
yep.
We're just going to use this to our advantage. And so if anyone wants to advertise that they have our stuff, like that's fantastic. Like I'd love to know about that, and I'm going to figure out how you got it, and then I'm going to have you move the market for me. And we mostly win, but we go through losing streaks, and I want anyone who thinks they have our stuff to be wondering, like, if they're losing, like, okay, is this just a losing streak, or like have they flipped me and I'm now like pushing things for them, right? Like I want that fear, because I genuinely don't want someone getting our stuff and getting it the same price as we get it, right? Like that's a bad thing. But like there's enough that we can do, and it's a small enough industry, and we have tentacles in enough places that we can generally see when something moves more than it should and figure out why it's happening.
I love that so much. I mean,
I don't want to blow up a fake right in your face right now, but for anyone who thinks that Rufus is giving them the biz and showing them the wrong way, if the market bounces back in your face, then yes, likely. If the market moves with you, then you likely have his stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, Taylor, but I got to blow up your fake right now.
That's fair. This is so. Maybe we'll get into this later, but it'd be fun to have a debate about the efficient market hypothesis.
No, I will say, like, it is obviously for you guys, like, if you can see stuff's moving stuff's moving when you're giving it out, then you can easily cut those people off. Like, that's probably the better solution anyways. There's no value in that, especially even people who move in this space right now. Like, this is all in. If you're moving for an originator or anybody or anything like that, and you're not being honest with like your exact fills, it's so easy to tell in today's day. Like, all they need to do is stare at a screen or something like that, or just even see it. It'll always come back. So I would recommend always being honest. Like, if you say, hey, I'm getting this amount, then obviously buffer for whatever amount you want. Obviously it's good to return maybe a straight fill sometimes. You don't want to have to always be like waiting to calculate to the penny, but give a rough amount and make sure that's roughly accurate. Otherwise, it probably will come back to haunt you.
Yeah, I honestly love this stuff, and I don't know that. Obviously, the people that are watching Circles Off here, there's a pretty wide distribution of people that watch our program, stemming from like the sharpest people in the industry to people who find us via YouTube search who are pure rec bettors, and they just are very interested in this stuff. But the whole betting game, market dynamics, as Taylor might call it, is really interesting. Like the amount of times that this stuff will happen in real life is way more often than you think, where you might send, out a play to get filled in 15 spots or whatever. But everyone's telling you like, this is not going to leak on the screen. I'm only betting it here. But then all of a sudden it does. And you have to kind of slowly figure out, okay, who's moving that? Who's not being truthful? I mean, it's the nature of the industry, but I actually think that's one of the more fun things about betting is not just like, okay, you come up with the model and that's always going to drive you and have an edge. But I think just the whole ecosystem and the dynamics of actually being able to fill big bets, I find that to be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's again just part of the biz. Yep. Just another challenge, like you said, another board game to solve.
That's it. Taylor, a long time ago, you wrote up a Twitter thread about all the things that helped you gain an edge. You mentioned Circles Off in there. Thank you very much for the plug, by the way, when you did that, for people who go back and find it. You're not so active on Twitter anymore. Totally understandable after interviewing today and hearing you go through your process. You can get into why if it's more than that. But let's just say you were going to write up a hypothetical Twitter thread today on any sports betting related topic. What would it be and why?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, a little bit like the Venn diagram of like things that are interesting to talk about and like things I'm willing to talk about like continues to shrink as time goes on, and as this is more and more like the money I make. So that's one big contributor to why I haven't talked about that. Or why I don't post more to Twitter. We mentioned the efficient market hypothesis. Like I'd love to have a debate with Johnny on that, but like I'm not willing to give any good argument publicly, and I may not be willing to give any good argument to Johnny either. Like I just don't want him knowing because he's competition in this space too, right? Like
that's fair.
That's like it's just where I'm at with this stuff. So if I had to pick one, I think there's some interesting stuff that I could talk about in like non-traditional correlated parlay markets. Non-traditional like correlated parlays.
His first thing on the thread, by the way, is like the video.
Smash that
like button right now. Look at all this info we're dropping. Follow Circles Off, subscribe on YouTube, and like the video. But Taylor, what's second on your list?
All right. So if I had to write one up, what I'd probably write about is starting with just how sick I am of people complaining about the college basketball market and not doing anything about it. So like, yes, I mentioned earlier, it's super frustrating when you see people, move a line early in the day. But in reality, it's a market. Your information just isn't worth what it used to be worth. And I'm sorry about that. But like, and it frustrates me too. Like I get frustrated by it, but like, that's just the nature of it. And I think we've recognized that as a problem. And there's some things that we've tried to do to improve that problem. There's this notion of what we call reverse crossing, where we're essentially buying people out of the market. But I think that's one of the things where I don't mind talking about it. It's like fairly interesting. And if more people did it, I think it would help the ecosystem, right? It would help preserve those lines longer. And that there's some debate to be had there about if it can actually work. But we found some other things that benefits us that I think helps benefit the market too.
Are you going to get into that? What is that?
Yeah, reverse. So first of all, there's crossing in the space. We've talked about this before. It's might be foreign to the casual or rec bettor because they don't really have a need to. Although actually they could for better prices. If the idea of me and Johnny both want to bet NBA game tonight. I like one side. Johnny likes the other side. There's no real sense in us going to a sports book and each placing the bet at -110 when we could just place a friendly bet amongst others. That's the concept of crossing. But you mentioned reverse crossing. I actually haven't heard that term before. If you want to get into it a little bit more, I'm interested to hear about that.
Yeah. So it all started out with a guy I respect. We've actually met at Bet Bash, and if we're betting 20K in a game, he's betting 2K in a game, right? And I was like, hey, like, I respect your opinion. I'd love, maybe I could get down for you, and I can use your stuff in my model too, right? Like I can use your information to understand if I'm way off, right? And he came to me and he said, let's do this. And so the first day, what you do when you generally cross is you compare lists. So he sent us his plays for the day, and we then said, okay, we disagree on these plays. Like, I'll fill those for you. And then what I watched happen was, and he's got some outs that are quiet, some outs that are loud. What I watched happen was all the games we disagreed on stayed still, and all the games that we agreed on all moved a half point at the market makers at like 9 a.m. And I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, that's the exact opposite of what I wanted to happen. So we basically made the decision we're going to do the opposite, right? So I'm not going to bet at 9 a.m., but I will fill for him at 9 a.m. So I'll give him a 2K position on the games that we agree on. I'll take a negative EV bet on my side to keep him out of the market. And I've talked about this with a few people, and they say that, like, hey, are you really keeping that information out of the market? Like, if it's that early in the day, isn't someone else just going to bet it? It's really hard to measure that. I think it had some impact, but I couldn't quantifiably say so. But the thing that I actually liked more about what we decided to do in this relationship is I said, I'll do that for you, but any game that we disagree on, or that we even like lean the other way on, you have to bet publicly and as loud as you can, right? So we're giving him early fills, which helps him. And then he's taking the games that are probably his worst plays, and he's going to bet them at Bookmaker and Penny and Bet Online. And we'll generally see a half point or a point move, or every once in a while we'll get lucky and catch some steam and it'll move further. And yeah, some of that's going to get bet back. But in general, like, now we've taken someone who helps contribute to an efficient market and essentially flipped them, right? It does mean I've got to fill 2K more. It does mean that I will, sometimes get stuck with a minus EV position for a small amount, but I think that's worth the trade-off. The other thing it does is it's confusing for the sharp books who do track their players. Like, this guy who's traditionally been a winner for all this year probably lost money at their book and wasn't a good predictor of closing line value. So now those accounts are now worth more to him too, right? And the fact that if we ever stop working together, he's going to move the line less is a good thing for me too.
The game within the game, man.
Game within the game. I will say I don't do any crossing myself. I never have. And for anyone who is interested in that, be careful. Obviously, check the laws for like your specific state or region where you're in. I'm not sure, like different countries and stuff like that. And then lastly is make sure you know who you're working with, right? Because could be, some people, some stiffs, other things like that. So if you are going to do that, make sure you don't go too much. Start small. And again, check the legalities for like specific regions.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that you're not booking action. That's the real no. So avoid that at all costs. And we recommend not doing that, just to make it explicitly clear here.
What else we got here? I think we're just about ready to wrap up, unless you had any other topics you wanted to mention, Taylor. If not, we'll get into our final questions.
No, that's good for me.
He did.
Yeah, minor minus EV, bonus one.
Bonus plus EV was the mattress.
So Taylor, we'll give your official. That was your bonus one. Official plus EV move of the week.
All right. So it is to join a book group. And I'm not talking like a sports betting book group, but I'm talking, and this is mostly geared towards men out there, who I imagine is most of your population, but it is very common.
97%. Sorry to interrupt you. 97%.
No, that's good to know.
Yes.
It's very common for women to join a book group. We recently moved to a new state, and my wife got invited to like 5 different book groups. And so she joined them. And so now once a month, I've got to put the kids to bed, which is, I love my kids, but like it's way less fun than like being out with friends and drinking. And so the first time this happened, me and some other dads joked like, hey, we got to start our own book group, kind of like being like, of course we wouldn't do that. But on like the 4th time, it was like, no, we're actually going to start a book group. And like, I don't care anything about the books. We're just going to like go hang out. And so we picked a book. We went out to a brewery and like had some beers. And then like something super interesting happened. We actually had like 2.5 hours of discussion about this book that I was not expecting. That was like fantastic discussion. And in one part of it's like, yes, we're talking about a book, but then it bleeds into like parenting or like the values you have or all these topics that traditionally it's hard for men who are not like friends for life or relatives to have meaningful discussion about. And it became like this fabric to have like a really meaningful discussion. And so I found that very surprising and now love my book group because of this. And like we get to go out and have beers like on a random Monday night, right? And it's, you know, the wife can't really be mad at me for it.
The game within the game. The game within the game. I don't want to put the kids to sleep, so it's book night tonight, and we're gonna have some beers.
I was gonna disagree at first, but you got me. I think you got me around there. I haven't done it, but power to you. That seems like a solid move.
So like, great plus EV, by the way. In my opinion, I'll broaden it a little bit because I do like a games night with my friends where we just do board games instead of books. But honestly, it's just really good to see friends and build relationships and talk. Like nowadays, it's so easy to log on to your Telegram or your WhatsApp or your Signal or whatever and chat, but it's just not the same. Like it's, you know, me and Johnny see each other once a week in person to record this pod, and we chat on Telegram, but like, you don't get the same experiences. So I actually really like that one. That's one of my favorite.
You don't get the same laughs, I'll tell you that much.
You definitely don't get the same laughs, and the jokes they just hit better in person.
I will make this publicly known. I'm not a big book guy.
Neither am I. I can't read. That's why I had to broaden it. I can never see myself reading a book and discussing it with a group. Me personally, but I think there's people that can. I only read to gain like a skill. That's it.
There's this thing called Audible though. Like you can listen to a book.
That's different, bro. That's completely different.
I can't. I personally cannot. I personally cannot.
If you listen, I can listen to books. That's fair. If you're listening, but reading the book is not. I don't learn. I don't like it like that. I'm too new school in that sense. But anyways, obviously, there's value to reading.
I'm not poo-pooing this, by the way, and I actually love this plus EV. It's just not for me in that exact form, but it's a solid one.
Rob or Zach, you guys got a plus EV?
No, you don't put me. I actually did, but I don't even remember what it is.
Nothing for today.
I might think of it, but we'll get Taylor's minus EV and then we'll come back.
I'll bring up another quick plus EV. It's been said multiple times, but the weather's coming around here in Toronto. Everybody, as predicted, so much happier. Yesterday, today, day before, you're walking outside, everyone's happier. No one's gonna kill you. It's way better. Still, there's got to be something to this warm weather stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyways, Taylor, back to you for a negative EV move of the week presented by Two Men and a Joke.
We don't have a sponsor yet. We're still working on that.
Okay. So this comes from something I did this weekend, but and it's a double negative, so I feel bad. But my minus EV of the week is not having a good campfire story to tell. And so it was my son's Cub Scout like camp out this weekend. So he's 7. I took my 7 and my 4-year-old. So we go to this campsite area, like it's like 30 kids and 30 adults, and we do the daily stuff. We do like canoe rides and hiking and like kids running around being idiots, and then they start to get tired, so we feed them dinner, and they get more tired, so we give them like s'mores, and now we're all sitting in front of a campfire, and it's like tradition, right? It's like it essentially turns into open mic night, right? But no one has stories prepared, no dads do, so the kids just sign up, and so it's like an hour and a half of like these kids who are drunk on candy, like getting up and trying to improv campfire stories. And now granted, they think it's hilarious, but it is very much not hilarious whatsoever. And then the one time a dad was like, hey, I've got a story to tell, like all the other dads were like, oh, like I'm going to sit up straight. I'm going to listen to this. I'm excited for this. Not only is it going to be interesting, but it also means like a kid can't be standing up there for like 15 minutes to like tell a story. And so my takeaway from that is the whole time I'm sitting there thinking like, man, I got to have a campfire story and I don't have one. And I think this goes way beyond parenting. Like I've sat around a lot of campfires in my life, and anyone who has a story to tell, they're always interesting. Like spooky or whatever, like, and that person is then more interesting to me too, right? It's like, oh, you can, like, this is something that you don't really have expectations that someone's going to be able to tell a story or not tell a story. So I think everyone should have a good rehearsed story. And so while I tried to sleep on the ground, which I can't do, like I've been working on my campfire story, and hopefully next time I'll be ready.
I'm a big campfire guy. I love a nice campfire at spring or autumn especially, but any time of year really. I'm the guy that if I know I'm going to a campfire, I'm gonna load my guitar into my car.
No,
but wait,
Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy.
Negative EV move of the year.
I'm not finished yet. I never break it out unless asked. But I always have it on demand.
You know how like you doing a card magic trick, you do a forced card. That's what Rob does with his guitar.
I will say
a little forced guitar. He's like, and then he gets it. Someone asks.
My closest group of friends really enjoys it.
Yeah,
it's all like '90s alternative guitar.
At least
covers,
you're a good. At least you're a good guitarist. At least you're like a good guitarist.
I'm
not like a guy just
hacking
started
it up and like playing a bunch of solos and stuff. No, I pander to the crowd. And sometimes they'll just be like, do you know this song or whatever? I don't, but I'm like, I can quickly pull up a tab in like 2 seconds on my phone and play it. Like, so I'm that guy. The stories, I've never had a campfire story in my life. Never even thought to think of one, but I have been around those incredibly awkward experiences where people are up there and you're just like, dude, wrap it up. This killing the vibe. So I completely get that one as well.
I got a negative EV move of the week. Been wanting to put this one out there for a while. Big bone I have to pick. I've been looking into this one. Never been 100% sure, but now I think I'm ready to pull the trigger on this one. It is so negative EV to be rocking clothing with other people's brands that you may or may not support. Now, hear me out. You want to rock brands that you support? Great. I'm wearing a betstamp hoodie right now. I'm wearing a Pinnacle hat. I support those brands. Go sign up at Pinnacle. Go use betstamp. Use a player props tool. Use a prop screen. I support those brands. I'm happy to actually put those out there and wear them on my body. What I don't get is people, you get a free t-shirt at a Jays game, says Honda on the front, wearing that around for 7 years. You don't even support Honda. You don't even know what they believe in. There's too many guys also buying clothes because of the brands. That's just extra terrible. Like if it's a buddy's company or something like that, all for it. You know, you're supporting your buddy wearing his brand. If it's a brand you believe in, you use the product, great. If it's whatever, like wearing a Leafs hat and you're a Leaf fan, all good. I'm not saying those are unacceptable brands, but we got to stop with these brands that people, you don't know what they stand for. You don't know what they believe in. You're just rocking them around, free advertising for nothing on your body, the most precious piece you got, and a rent.
Yeah. Well, Matt, how about the people who tattoo stuff on like brands on their body?
I'm not a big tattoo guy.
I'm not a tattoo guy. I know that.
Taylor, what do you think? What are you rocking right now?
I just say I feel like you're calling me out. No, this is Salty Turtle. This is Zach White's brewery.
There you go. So, you're rocking your buddy's brand of his brewery. Completely fine. That's not in this.
We have to get Zach White on the program. So I sat next to Zach at the Bet Bash Hall of Fame dinner last year. Guy is a true legend.
He has the Super Bowl props, right? Maybe we'll have him on.
He was very disappointed that he had not been invited out to a World Putting League mini golf event. He heard about that and he was like, I'm your guy, man. I'm your guy. Get me out to those. Zach White. Shout out to Zach.
For sure, got to get him on the Super Bowl prop special.
Yeah, we'll get him on.
And we should get Taylor on too now if he's going to give out under 13 and a half plus 800.
This MGM kiosk here for this one. Oh, man,
we'll be boosting our record.
You know what? I mean, we would have previously asked you if you could go back 5 years and talk to a previous version of yourself. What advice would you give to your former self? I don't know if we're going to retire that question now after last week.
No, you know what? Would you have a different answer than last time? I don't know what you answered last time, but a couple of years has passed, and maybe 2 years has passed. What is the advice different now?
It is. Mostly because I don't want to repeat myself, and I haven't listened to every episode, so I'm going a little bit further off the wall. But for me, it would be don't think at your computer. So, like, there have been so many times where I'm, like, trying to solve a hard problem, like sitting at my computer, whether it's like a modeling problem or like a market thing. And I just sit there and I'm like staring at the computer. I'm like 60 minutes, 90 minutes, no good answer. And like the second I get up, and it's always for a bad reason, like got to go to the bathroom or got to go home. I'm like 10 minutes into, or like, taking like 100 steps and I'm like, oh, like that's the answer. Like maybe this is just me and like I've got to move to get my blood flowing or something. But if I could go back, I think I could, save tens to hundreds of hours of just wasted time by like getting up and moving. And so I give that to myself. I don't know if it'll help anyone else, but that's why I'm at.
from the best ideas I've ever had have come on the toilet. So I've been away from a computer, and I'm not joking. Like, this is not some sort of attempt at comedy. Sometimes it's just it's a better spot for me to think. I don't know what it is, man. You're not staring at a screen, you know. That's it.
Yeah, can never, obviously, getting up and moving. Why not? Check it out.
Yeah, of course.
Anyways, everybody, this has been episode whatever number it was. Don't
give out a false number. You get roasted in the comments. We did that one time.
152.
There you go.
This has been episode 152 of the Circles Off podcast here over at the Hammer Betting Network. Thank you very much, Taylor. Round 2. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below, and we'll see y'all next week.